The cool mountain air felt refreshing against Cash's face as he stepped out of the bus. Pine trees stretched tall all around them, and the Colorado mountains looked beautiful in the afternoon sun. He had been working so hard lately that he almost forgot what fresh air smelled like. This company retreat was exactly what everyone needed after months of tough work and long hours. Cash pulled his jacket tighter and looked around at his colleagues. Everyone seemed happy to be away from the office. People were talking and laughing, more than they had in weeks. The resort looked nice with its wooden buildings and big windows that showed the mountain views. It felt like a completely different world from their usual workplace. "Hey Cash, can you believe we actually get 3 whole days away from emails?" his colleague David said, walking up beside him with a big smile. "I know, right? I keep checking my phone even though I know there's barely any signal up here," Cash replied, laughing a little. It was true. He had already checked his phone 5 times since getting off the bus, and each time there were no new messages. It felt strange, but also kind of freeing. The first day went by quickly with team-building activities and presentations. Everyone seemed more relaxed than usual. During lunch, people were actually talking about things other than work. Some shared stories about their families, others talked about hobbies they never had time for. Cash found himself enjoying conversations he normally wouldn't have time for during busy workdays. As evening approached, the organizers gathered everyone in the main lodge. The room was cozy with a big fireplace crackling in the corner and comfortable chairs arranged in a circle. The warm light made everyone's faces look friendly and relaxed. "All right, everyone, we have a surprise for tonight," announced Jennifer, one of the event organizers. She looked excited about something. "We thought it would be fun to have an impromptu talent show. Nothing too serious, just a chance for everyone to share something special or fun." The room filled with nervous laughter and murmurs. People started looking around at each other with curious expressions. Some seemed interested while others looked like they wanted to hide under their chairs. "Come on, don't be shy," Jennifer continued. "This is all about having fun and getting to know each other better. Who knows what hidden talents we have in this group?" Cash felt comfortable just watching from his chair near the back. He had never been the type to perform in front of people. Throughout his career, he was known for being thoughtful, analytical, and professional. He preferred working behind the scenes, solving problems and getting things done. The idea of being the center of attention made him feel uncomfortable. "I'll do some magic tricks," volunteered Tom from accounting. Everyone clapped and seemed excited about that. Tom had always been outgoing and funny, so this didn't surprise anyone. "I can tell some jokes," offered Lisa from Human Resources. More clapping and encouraging words followed. Lisa was always making people laugh during meetings, so this seemed perfect for her. Then something unexpected happened. From somewhere in the middle of the room, someone called out, "What about Cash? I bet he has some hidden talents." Cash felt his stomach drop. All eyes turned toward him, and he could feel his face getting warm. He waved his hand dismissively and laughed nervously. "Oh no, not me. I'm much better in the audience." But then another voice joined in. "Come on, Cash. Everyone should participate. It's all about team spirit." "Yeah, what can you do? Play an instrument, dance?" someone else added, and more people started chiming in with suggestions. The suggestions got more and more ridiculous, and people started laughing. Someone suggested he might be a secret dancer. Another person joked that maybe he could do stand-up comedy. The atmosphere was light and friendly, but Cash felt more and more uncomfortable as the attention stayed focused on him. Then Robert from the finance department called out, "I bet Cash can sing. He probably has a great voice hiding in there." The room erupted in laughter. The idea seemed so unlikely that everyone found it hilarious. Cash was known for being quiet and serious during meetings. Nobody had ever heard him even hum in the office. The suggestion seemed completely opposite to his personality. "Sing? Cash?" David laughed good-naturedly. "That would be something to see." More people joined in the laughter, but it wasn't mean-spirited. They all liked and respected Cash, but the idea just seemed so funny because it was so unexpected. It was like suggesting that their most serious colleague might secretly be a comedian or a circus performer. Jennifer, caught up in the excitement and laughter, grabbed her clipboard. "You know what? That's a great idea. Cash singing it is." She wrote his name down before he could stop her. "Wait, I didn't actually agree to anything," Kash said quickly, but his voice got lost in all the talking and laughing around him. "Oh, come on, it'll be fun," Jennifer said with a big smile. "Everyone's doing something, it's just for fun, nothing serious." Kash looked around the room at all the friendly faces. Everyone seemed excited about the idea, even though they clearly thought it would be amusing rather than impressive. He realized there was no polite way to back out now without looking like he couldn't take a joke or wasn't a team player. I guess I could try something," he said quietly, immediately regretting the words as soon as they left his mouth. The room cheered and applauded as if he had just agreed to climb Mount Everest. People were patting him on the back and making encouraging comments. The attention made him feel even more nervous. "Great, the talent show starts at 8 o'clock, Jennifer announced. "That gives everyone a couple hours to prepare whatever they want to do." As people started to scatter and talk about their plans for the evening, Kash sat in his chair feeling like he had just made a terrible mistake. His colleagues were chatting excitedly about what they would do for their performances, but all he could think about was how embarrassing this was going to be. He had never sung alone in front of people before. Even in school, he had always been more comfortable with academic subjects than anything artistic or creative. The thought of standing in front of all these people and trying to sing made his palms sweaty. David came over and sat beside him. "Hey, don't worry about it too much. Everyone's just having fun. Nobody expects anything professional." "That's exactly the problem," Kash replied. "They're all expecting it to be funny because they think I can't do it." "Well, can you?" David asked with genuine curiosity. Kash thought about it for a moment. "I honestly don't know. I haven't tried to sing anything since I was a kid." "Then maybe you'll surprise everyone," David said with an encouraging smile. "Sometimes we don't know what we can do until we try." After David walked away, Kash sat alone for a few minutes watching the fire crackle in the fireplace. The room had mostly emptied out as people went to their rooms to rest or prepare for their performances. He could hear laughter and conversations in the hallways as his colleagues seemed excited about the evening ahead. He finally got up and walked slowly to his room, his mind racing with worry about what he had gotten himself into. The mountain air that had felt so refreshing earlier now felt cold and sharp. He wondered if he could still find a way out of this situation, maybe by claiming he felt sick or had an important work call to make. But deep down, he knew he couldn't do that. These people were his colleagues and friends. They had all been working hard together, and this retreat was supposed to bring everyone closer as a team. Backing out now would just make things awkward and might hurt the friendly relationships he had built with everyone. As he reached his room and put the key in the door, Kash took a deep breath and tried to calm his nerves. He had faced difficult challenges in his career before. He had handled stressful situations and found ways to solve complicated problems. Surely he could figure out how to get through one 3-minute song without completely embarrassing himself. He opened the door to his room and stepped inside, already dreading what the next few hours would bring. The mountain view from his window looked peaceful and beautiful, but he barely noticed it. All he could think about was the moment when he would have to stand in front of everyone and try to sing, knowing they were all expecting it to be more entertaining than impressive. Little did he know that this moment of discomfort would lead to something completely unexpected, something that would change how his colleagues saw him and how he saw himself. Kash closed his room door and leaned against it, feeling like his heart was beating too fast. The room was quiet except for the sound of wind moving through the pine trees outside his window. He looked at his watch. It was only 6 o'clock, 2 hours until the talent show. 2 hours until he would have to stand in front of everyone and sing. He walked over to the window and stared out at the mountains. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky in soft orange and pink colors. It should have been peaceful and beautiful, but all he could think about was the worried feeling in his stomach. How did he end up in this situation? Just a few hours ago, he was feeling relaxed and happy about being away from work stress. Now he felt more nervous than he had during any important business meeting. Kash sat down on the edge of his bed and put his head in his hands. Maybe he could call Jennifer and tell her he wasn't feeling well. Food poisoning maybe, or a sudden headache. But even as he thought about it, he knew he couldn't do that. It would be obvious that he was just scared, and everyone would remember it. Plus, Jennifer had seemed so excited about the whole talent show idea. He stood up and started pacing around the small room. What was he supposed to sing anyway? He tried to think of popular songs, but his mind went blank. When was the last time he had even listened to music carefully enough to learn all the words? He was always so busy with work that he usually just had music playing in the background while he did other things. From down the hall he could hear other people talking and laughing in their rooms. Someone was playing music, probably Tom practicing for his magic show. The sounds made Kash feel even more alone with his worry. Everyone else seemed excited about their performances while he felt like he was preparing for disaster. He tried humming a few songs quietly to himself, but his voice sounded shaky and uncertain. He hadn't used his voice for singing in so long that it felt strange and unfamiliar. In his normal work life, he spoke clearly and confidently during meetings and presentations, but singing was completely different. It required a different kind of confidence that he wasn't sure he had. Kash went to the bathroom and looked at himself in the mirror. His face looked tired and worried. He tried practicing a smile, the kind he would need when he got on stage, but it looked forced and fake. He splashed some cold water on his face and took a deep breath. "You can do this," he said quietly to his reflection. "It's just 3 minutes, how hard can it be?" But even as he said the words, he didn't believe them. 3 minutes could feel like 3 hours when you were standing alone in front of a group of people, trying to do something you had never done before. He went back to his room and sat on the bed again. This time, he tried to think more systematically about the problem, the way he would approach a work challenge. What songs did he actually know well enough to sing? What would be safe and not too embarrassing? He thought about popular songs from the radio, but most of them had complicated rhythms or high notes that he probably couldn't handle. He considered simple songs like "Happy Birthday," but that seemed silly for a talent show. What about Christmas songs? But it wasn't anywhere near Christmas, so that would seem odd too. Then, without really planning it, he found himself humming something different. It was a melody that came from somewhere deep in his memory, something his grandmother used to sing when he was very young. The tune was simple and gentle, and the words started coming back to him slowly. His grandmother had passed away when he was in college, but he still remembered sitting in her kitchen while she cooked, listening to her sing old songs in Gujarati while she worked. She had a beautiful voice, and she would often translate the songs for him, telling him what they meant and why they were important. One song in particular had always been special to her. It was about having courage when things got difficult, about finding strength inside yourself when the world felt scary or uncertain. She used to tell him that the song had helped her through many hard times in her life, including when she first came to America as a young woman, not speaking English, well, and feeling lost in a new country. Kash found himself humming the melody more confidently now. The tune was simple but beautiful, and as he remembered more of the words, he realized that he actually knew the entire song by heart. His grandmother had sung it so often that it had become part of his childhood memories, stored away in his mind without him even realizing it. He started singing the words quietly, first in English as his grandmother had translated them for him, then trying to remember the original Gujarati lyrics. To his surprise, they came back to him more easily than he expected. The sounds and rhythms felt familiar on his tongue, like something that had been waiting patiently in his memory for the right moment to emerge. As he sang, he began to feel something different from the nervousness that had been troubling him all evening. The song brought back memories of his grandmother's warm kitchen, the smell of spices and cooking, and the feeling of being completely safe and loved. She had always made him feel like he could handle anything, like he was stronger and braver than he thought he was. The words of the song started to make sense to him in a new way. His grandmother had sung about courage during difficult times, but she had also lived those words. She had left her home country, learned a new language, and built a life in a place that was completely foreign to her. If she could do that, surely he could handle singing one song in front of his colleagues. Kash walked back to the window and continued singing softly while looking out at the mountains. The sun had set further, and the sky was getting darker, but there was still enough light to see the beautiful landscape. As he sang his grandmother's song, he felt like she was there with him somehow, giving him the same encouragement she had always provided when he was young and facing something that seemed too big or too scary. He began to understand that this wasn't really about impressing anyone or even about avoiding embarrassment. It was about honoring his grandmother's memory and the lessons she had taught him about facing fear with dignity and courage. She had always told him that the most important thing wasn't to be perfect, but to be genuine and to face challenges with an open heart. The nervousness was still there, but it was mixed now with something else, a sense of connection to something larger than his immediate worry about the performance. He was going to sing his grandmother's song, not because he was a great singer, but because it meant something to him and because she had taught him that meaning was more important than perfection. Kash practiced the song several more times, each time feeling more connected to the words and the melody. He wasn't thinking anymore about how his colleagues would react or whether they would be impressed. Instead, he was thinking about his grandmother and the strength she had always shown, the way she had faced uncertainty with grace and dignity. There was a knock on his door, and he heard David's voice calling through it. "Hey, Kash, we're all going down to dinner soon. You doing okay in there?" "Yeah, I'm fine," Kash called back, "just getting ready for tonight." "Need any help? I used to be in the school choir if you want someone to listen to you practice." Kash considered the offer for a moment, but then decided against it. This felt like something he needed to do alone, at least for now. "Thanks, but I think I've got it figured out. I'll see you at dinner." He heard David's footsteps moving away down the hall. Kash looked at his watch again. It was almost 7 o'clock now. The talent show would start in an hour. He felt ready, in a way that he hadn't expected. Not ready because he was confident about his singing ability, but ready because he had found something meaningful to share. He sang through the song one more time, thinking about each word and what it had meant. To his grandmother, the song was about finding light in darkness, about discovering that you had more strength than you realized, about trusting that difficult moments would pass, and that courage could carry you through them. As he finished singing, Kash realized that his grandmother had been preparing him for this moment his whole life, not just through the song she had taught him, but through the example of how she had lived. She had shown him that courage wasn't about not being afraid. It was about doing what mattered to you even when you were afraid. He straightened his shirt and looked at himself in the mirror one more time. This time, his reflection looked calmer and more determined. He wasn't going to go downstairs and try to impress anyone with his singing voice. Instead, he was going to share something that connected him to someone he had loved and respected, and he was going to do it with the same courage she had always shown. The talent show was still an hour away, but Kash felt like the most important. Part of his preparation was complete. He had found not just a song to sing, but a reason to sing it that went deeper than his fear of embarrassment. His grandmother had always told him that when you had a good reason for doing something, the how would take care of itself. Now it was time to find out if she had been right about that too. The main lodge felt different when Kash walked in at 8 o'clock. All the chairs had been arranged in rows facing a small area near the fireplace that served as their makeshift stage. The warm, cozy feeling from earlier in the day had been replaced by the buzzing energy of people excited for entertainment. Everyone was talking and laughing, and the room felt alive with anticipation. Kash found a seat in the back row, hoping to stay invisible until his turn came. His stomach still had butterflies, but the panicked feeling from earlier had settled into something more manageable. He kept thinking about his grandmother's words about courage, and it helped him feel more grounded. Jennifer stood up in front of everyone with a big smile. "All right, everyone. Welcome to our very first annual company talent show. We have some amazing acts lined up tonight, so let's give everyone our full attention and lots of encouragement." The audience clapped enthusiastically. Kash looked around at his colleagues' faces and saw genuine excitement. These were good people who supported each other, and he reminded himself that they would be kind no matter what happened during his performance. Tom went first with his magic tricks. He had clearly spent time practicing, and while his tricks were simple, he presented them with such enthusiasm that everyone was entertained. He made a coin disappear and reappear behind someone's ear, and he turned a red handkerchief into a blue one. The audience laughed and clapped at all the right moments, and Tom looked thrilled with their response. Thank you, Tom said with a dramatic bow. Remember, it's all about the magic of believing in yourself. Everyone cheered, and Kash found himself smiling despite his nerves. The atmosphere in the room was warm and supportive. Exactly what Jennifer had hoped for when she planned this event. Next up was Lisa with her comedy routine. She told jokes about office life that had everyone laughing because they were so relatable. She talked about the printer that never worked, the coffee that was either too strong or too weak, and the meeting that could have been an email. Her timing was perfect, and she had the whole room cracking up. And don't even get me started on the office microwave, Lisa said, gesturing dramatically. I swear it has its own personality, and it doesn't like any of us. The laughter filled the room, and even Kash found himself forgetting his nervousness for a few moments. Lisa was a natural entertainer, and her jokes were exactly the kind of lighthearted fun that everyone needed after their stressful work period. After Lisa, a group of people from the marketing department performed a dance routine they had quickly put together. It was messy and uncoordinated, but they were having so much fun that their joy was infectious. They bumped into each other, forgot their steps, and laughed through the whole performance. The audience loved it because their enthusiasm was so genuine. We call that the teamwork dance, one of them announced breathlessly at the end. As you can see, we're still working on the teamwork part. Everyone applauded loudly, and the dancers took exaggerated bows while still giggling about their mistakes. The whole room felt relaxed and happy, like one big family sharing a fun evening together. Then Jennifer looked at her list and called out, "Next up, we have Kash singing for us." The room went quiet for a moment, and then there was polite applause, mixed with some chuckling. Kash could hear people whispering things like, "This should be interesting," and "I can't wait to see this." He knew they weren't being mean, but they clearly expected his performance to be more amusing than impressive. Kash stood up slowly, his legs feeling a bit shaky. The walk from his seat to the front of the room felt much longer than it actually was. Every step seemed to take forever, and he was very aware of all the eyes watching him. When he reached the makeshift stage area, he turned to face the audience and saw dozens of friendly but curious faces looking back at him. The room was quieter now, but not in a focused way. People were still chatting quietly among themselves, and he could see some folks checking their phones. A few people were smiling in anticipation of what they expected to be an entertaining disaster. The casual atmosphere made it clear that nobody was taking his performance seriously. Kash took a deep breath and tried to remember everything he had thought about in his room. This wasn't about impressing anyone or proving anything. It was about honoring his grandmother and sharing something that meant something to him. He closed his eyes for a moment and tried to picture her face, to remember the sound of her voice when she used to sing this same song. "I'm going to sing a song that my grandmother taught me when I was young," he said quietly. His voice was barely loud enough for people in the front row to hear, and several people in the back called out, "Louder, and speak up." He cleared his throat and tried again. "This is a song my grandmother used to sing. It's in Gujarati, and it's about finding courage when things get difficult." There was some polite nodding and a few encouraging smiles, but he could tell that most people were just waiting for him to get on with it. Someone in the middle of the room was still talking to their neighbor about something completely unrelated. Kash closed his eyes again and started to sing. His voice began very softly, almost like he was singing to himself rather than to an audience. The Gujarati words felt strange in his mouth at first after speaking English all day, but as he continued, they became more natural and familiar. The melody was simple and beautiful, rising and falling in gentle waves. The song started with verses about darkness and uncertainty, about feeling lost and afraid. Kash's voice was quiet but clear, and slowly, very slowly, the conversations in the room began to fade away. As he sang the second verse, something started to change. His voice grew, a little stronger, and he began to feel more connected to the words he was singing. The song was telling the story of someone facing challenges and finding the strength to continue, and as he sang it, Kash felt like he was living that story himself. The room was getting quieter now. People were starting to actually listen instead of just waiting politely for him to finish. There was something in his voice that was different from what they had expected. It wasn't technically perfect, he wasn't a trained singer, but there was an honesty and emotion in it that was impossible to ignore. By the third verse, the room was completely silent. Every conversation had stopped. Every phone had been put away. People were sitting forward in their chairs, really listening to what Kash was singing. The song was building to its main message about finding light in darkness, about discovering inner strength you didn't know you had. Kash opened his eyes and looked out at his audience for the first time since he had started singing. What he saw surprised him. Instead of the politely bored or amused faces he had expected, he saw people who were completely focused on his performance. Some people had tears in their eyes. Others were nodding along with the melody, even though they couldn't understand the words. The song reached its emotional center, the part where his grandmother had always told him the message became clear. Even though the words were in Gujarati, somehow the meaning was coming through in his voice and in the melody. It was a song about not giving up, about finding hope when everything seemed hopeless, about trusting that you had more strength than you realized. As Kash sang these crucial verses, his voice became stronger and more confident. He wasn't thinking about technique or hitting the right notes anymore. He was thinking about his grandmother and all the times she had faced difficulties with grace and courage. He was thinking about everyone in this room and the challenges they had all faced together at work and in their personal lives. The song began to build toward its conclusion, and Kash felt something he had never experienced before while performing. He felt completely present in the moment, completely connected to what he was doing. The nervousness was still there, but it had transformed into energy that made his voice more powerful and more expressive. People in the audience were no longer just listening politely. They were emotionally engaged with his performance in a way that surprised everyone, including Kash himself. The song was speaking to something universal, something that everyone could understand regardless of the language barrier. David, who was sitting in the third row, later said that he got goosebumps during this part of the performance. Lisa, the comedian who had performed earlier, found herself wiping away tears even though she couldn't understand a single word Kash was singing. Tom, the magician, forgot completely about his own successful performance and focused entirely on what was happening in front of him. As the song moved toward its final verse, Kash felt his grandmother's presence more strongly than he had in years. It was as if she was there in the room with him, encouraging him the way she always had when he was young. The final verses were about triumph over adversity, about the joy that comes after surviving difficult times, about the wisdom that comes from facing your fears. His voice soared on these final lines, carrying all the emotion and meaning that the song held for him and for his grandmother's memory. The melody rose to its highest point and then settled into a gentle, peaceful conclusion that spoke of resolution and hope. As the last note faded away, the room fell into complete silence. It was the kind of silence that happens when something unexpected and beautiful has just occurred, when people need a moment to process what they have experienced. Kash stood there, breathing heavily, looking out at faces that showed a mixture of surprise, appreciation, and genuine emotion. The silence stretched on for what felt like forever, and for a moment Kash wondered if something had gone wrong. The silence in the room felt like it lasted forever. Kash stood there, his heart beating fast, wondering if he had done something wrong. He could see his colleagues' faces, but their expressions were hard to read. Some people looked surprised, others seemed thoughtful, and a few had tears in their eyes. Nobody was moving or making any sound. For a moment, Kash felt that familiar wave of worry. Maybe his performance had been too personal, too different from what everyone expected. Maybe singing in Gujarati had been a mistake. Maybe he should have chosen something more familiar, something that wouldn't have created this awkward silence. Then, from somewhere in the middle of the room, one person started clapping. It was slow, deliberate clapping, the kind that happens when someone is truly moved by what they've just experienced. Kash looked toward the sound and saw that it was Patricia from the legal department. She was clapping with tears streaming down her face, and she was looking directly at him, with an expression of genuine appreciation. Within seconds, David joined in with his own applause. Then Lisa started clapping too, and then Tom. One by one, more people began to clap, but it wasn't the quick, polite applause they had given to the earlier performances. This was different. This was the kind of clapping that comes from the heart, when people have been touched by something unexpected and beautiful. As more people joined in the applause, something amazing started to happen. Patricia stood up from her chair, still clapping. Then David stood up too. Within moments, Lisa was on her feet, and then Tom, and then the entire front row was standing and applauding. The applause grew louder and more enthusiastic as person after person rose from their seats. Soon half the room was standing, and the sound of clapping filled the entire lodge. But it wasn't just polite clapping anymore. People were cheering and calling out encouraging words. "That was beautiful," someone shouted from the back. "Amazing," called out another voice. "We had no idea," yelled someone else. Within less than a minute, every single person in the room was standing and applauding. The sound was incredible. Dozens of people clapping and cheering with genuine enthusiasm and emotion. The standing ovation continued, for what felt like an eternity, with people refusing to stop clapping or sit back down. Kash stood there in complete shock. This was so far from what he had expected that his mind was having trouble processing what was happening. He had prepared himself for polite applause at best, or perhaps some gentle teasing about his attempt to sing. He had never imagined that his performance would create this kind of response. The applause seemed to go on forever. People were not just clapping mechanically. They were putting real energy and emotion into it. Some people were wiping tears from their eyes while they clapped. Others were smiling so widely that their faces looked like they might hurt. A few people were shaking their heads in amazement, as if they couldn't believe what they had just witnessed. Jennifer, the event organizer, was standing near the front with tears streaming down her face. She had planned this talent show to be a fun, light-hearted way to end the day, but she had never expected anything like this. She kept clapping while shaking her head in wonder, clearly moved by how the evening had turned out. Finally, after what must have been a full minute of sustained applause, people began to sit back down. But even as they returned to their seats, the energy in the room remained high. People were talking excitedly to each other, sharing their reactions to what they had just experienced. "I got chills," David was saying to the person next to him. "Actual chills during that performance." "I don't understand a word of Gujarati," Lisa was telling someone, "but I felt like I understood every word he sang." "Who knew?" Tom was saying with a huge smile. "Who knew that Kash had something like that inside him?" Kash slowly walked back toward his seat, but he didn't make it very far before people started approaching him. Patricia was the first to reach him, and she gave him a warm hug without saying anything at first. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. "That was the most beautiful thing I've heard in years," she said quietly. "Thank you for sharing that with us." It felt like a gift. Before Kash could respond, David was there too, patting him on the back with a huge grin. "Man, where did that come from? That was incredible. You completely blew us all away." "I had no idea you could sing like that," added Lisa, joining the small group that was forming around Kash. "But more than that, I had no idea you had that kind of, I don't know how to describe it, that kind of soul in your voice." More people kept coming over to talk to him. Everyone wanted to share how the performance had affected them, and their comments were far more thoughtful and emotional than Kash had ever expected. "My grandmother used to sing to me in Italian when I was little," said Frank from accounting. "I haven't thought about those songs in years, but listening to you tonight brought all those memories back. There's something special about hearing music in the language of your family." "I don't know what the words meant," added Rachel from marketing, "but I felt like I could understand the emotions behind them. It was like you were telling us a story about overcoming something difficult, and we could all relate to that feeling." "Reminded me of my own grandmother," said another colleague. "She passed away last year, and she used to tell me stories about being brave when life got hard. Your song felt like it was about the same kinds of things." As person after person shared their reactions, Kash began to realize that something much bigger had happened than he had intended. He had simply wanted to get through his performance without embarrassing himself, but somehow his grandmother's song had connected with everyone in the room on a deep, personal level. "What was the song about?" asked Jennifer, who had finally made her way over to join the conversation. "I could tell it was meaningful, but I'd love to know what the words were saying." Kash took a deep breath, still feeling overwhelmed by all the attention and positive reactions. "It's a song my grandmother taught me when I was young. The words are about finding courage when you're facing difficult times. It talks about how we all have more strength inside us than we realize, and how we can find light even in our darkest moments." "That's exactly what it felt like," said David. "Even without understanding the language, that message came through clearly in your voice." "Your grandmother sounds like she was a wise woman," added Patricia. "She would be proud of you for sharing her song with us tonight." The comment about his grandmother being proud hit Kash harder than he expected. For a moment, he felt so emotional that he couldn't speak. He had been thinking about her throughout his performance, but hearing someone else acknowledge her wisdom and the importance of what she had taught him made everything feel even more meaningful. "She was," he managed to say. "She always told me that courage wasn't about not being afraid. It was about doing what matters to you even when you are afraid. I was definitely afraid tonight, but I kept thinking about her words." "Well, you certainly found your courage," said Lisa with a warm smile. "And you gave all of us a gift in the process." As the evening continued, people kept approaching Kash to share their thoughts about his performance. Some told him about their own grandparents and the wisdom they had passed down. Others talked about times in their own lives when they had needed to find courage in difficult situations. Many people said that his song had reminded them of the importance of staying connected to their families and their heritage. The talent show officially continued with a few more performances, but the energy in the room had completely changed. Everyone seemed more open, more connected to each other. The earlier performances had been fun and entertaining, but Kash's song had created something deeper, a sense of shared humanity and understanding. Throughout the rest of the evening, people kept coming up to Kash with new thoughts about his performance. Some asked him to teach them a few words in Gujarati. Others wanted to know more about his grandmother and the stories she used to tell. A few people shared their own family songs and traditions that they hadn't thought about in years. "You know what's amazing?" said Tom during one of these conversations. "We've all been working together for years, but tonight feels like the first time we're really seeing each other as complete people, not just as colleagues." "That's exactly right," agreed Jennifer. "This whole retreat was supposed to help us connect better as a team, but I never imagined anything like this would happen." As the evening wound down and people began heading back to their rooms, many stopped to thank Kash one more time. The words they used were different, but the message was the same. His performance had touched them in a way they hadn't expected, and they felt grateful to have experienced it. "I'll never forget tonight," Patricia told him as she was leaving. "Whenever I'm facing something difficult, I'm going to remember your song and think about finding that courage inside myself." "Same here," added David. "And I'm going to call my own grandmother tomorrow. Your performance reminded me that I don't tell her often enough how much she means to me." When Kash finally made it back to his own room, he sat by the window looking out at the dark mountains. The stars were incredibly bright in the clear mountain air, and the whole scene felt peaceful and perfect. He thought about his grandmother, and how proud she would have been to see her song touch so many people. He had started the day dreading this performance, worried about embarrassing himself in front of his colleagues. Instead, he had discovered something about himself that he never knew existed. He had found the courage to share something deeply personal, and in doing so, he had created connections with his colleagues that went far beyond their usual work relationships. Most importantly, he had honored his grandmother's memory in a way that would have made her incredibly proud. Her song about finding courage in difficult times had given him exactly the courage he needed, and it had touched the hearts of everyone who heard it. The practical joke that was supposed to embarrass him had instead become one of the most meaningful experiences of his life.